Why don't we get started? Hey everyone, welcome to Xoogler School's last week. We're so excited to kick this off with Marissa Huang. She is from Niantic Labs, and she actually hosted a Xoogler.co event in their offices when we actually had in-person events as a thing for the Xoogler community. And so when we were actually thinking about how we could actually help Xoogler students understand about job opportunities in amazing companies such as Google, but also at Facebook, which is also where Marissa had worked. And now she's been at Niantic Inc., is now called Niantic Labs for 3 years and 8 months. We thought we'd invite her on. And so I'm so glad also that we have Lucas here, who's one of our students who's going to co-moderate this with me. So without further ado, I want to ask Marissa to kick this off with a longer introduction about her career and herself, and then we'll go through a few questions. And students, there's a door usual. Please start putting your questions in there. So, Marissa, over to you for now.
Awesome. Hi, Chris. Thanks so much again for the invitation. I'm a big fan of Xoogler, and I was super excited to hear about Xoogler School. So thanks all for taking the time to chat. As Chris mentioned, my name is Marissa. I am the head of talent at Niantic Labs. Niantic Labs has a long history in connection to Google. The founders were initially the founders for Keyhole, which was acquired by Google and became a lot of the technology that is Google Maps today. And so if you don't know about Niantic, hopefully you know about Pokemon Go. We are basically an AR platform. We're building an AR platform that also supports AR games. So AR, I'm guessing that a lot of you already know, but it's essentially how you interact with the real world with a lot of different virtual concepts. So in Pokemon Go, you'll see different Pokemon characters overlaid. It could be sensory, haptic. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact and make it kind of more real in that sense. So super excited to talk to all of you. We do have internship opportunities, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But today I'd really like to just kind of focus on, what things to kind of look for in general as you're looking for new roles. And sort of what other companies are looking for. So I've worked at really small startups to kind of Google and Facebook, as Chris mentioned, pre-IPO, but still they were very large companies. And across the board, I would say there are definitely different themes. Kind of like what we look for candidates, how you can sort of get prepared and get connected so that you can, get the most out of your internship or full-time opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much, Marissa. So why don't we really dive straight into Niantic's sort of job hunting sort of process and how you really recruit from the student population. Let's start that as a first question, if you don't mind, Marissa.
Of course. And so everything has actually changed due to COVID. So I'll tell you a little bit about how things worked before and how they're working now. In the past, we've had a pretty small cohort for our new grad and internship hiring. Just because when I first started, so I started about almost 4 years ago, and we were about 70 people, and now we're a little over 600. And so a lot of growth there. In the beginning, we're still, for all of the different games and projects that we're trying to do, we're definitely still looking to grow. And I would say that initially we had a lot of folks who were either senior or staff level engineers from Google and different companies, just because if you think about how many players we have, just even on our games, it's so much that we're really building out that platform and infrastructure. So we're looking for folks who have a lot of experience architecting these huge systems. And then there's also the cool part, there's kind of the game component, which I'll talk about. And so in the past, we actually kept our intern and our new grad classes very, very small. We actually do not post new grad positions overall, only intern positions. And we usually host about between 15 to 20 interns every year. And we get a lot of applications. Even for a company at our size and stage, we're seeing, several thousand applications. And as you think about sort of larger companies, they'll see many, many more. And so at that point, what we do is we really looked for matching. So we have interns work on our Pokemon Go client roles, which is more around the game development of Pokemon Go. And so they do a lot of work in Unity, Java, C++. There's also the Pokemon Go server side, which is, obviously server side development. Again, a lot of Java and C++. We have another team which works on our platform. And again, a lot of C++ and Java. You're seeing a theme here for our roles. And then we have other positions kind of across our AR server. And so those are the positions that we feel like are a really good match for folks who may not have as much industry experience, but are really excited about working at Niantic, working on games, seeing even if they're working more on the platform and server side, they're still seeing kind of a completion in their project and how it kind of a lot of the features that they're building are put into our games. So right now we're kind of even going through our full-time intern conversions as well as opening up our new positions. And it's been really, really fun. We really make sure that our mentors have a commitment to all of the interns they host. They have to come up with a project beforehand. They sort of interview as a mentor in that capacity, and then we start matching. So this has always been the same. The kind of slight difference right now is because of COVID, we actually switched all of our positions for this past intern class to remote. And so, as you probably, I don't know if any of you were interning during COVID or applying before. Some companies actually stopped hosting. Some companies kind of shifted their direction. We really didn't want to disappoint our interns, so we shifted to remote. It caused, it actually took up a lot of just different things on the operations side, just because we can't payroll in every country. You have to have entities. So we worked on that, but everything worked out. And actually the interns really loved it. And almost in a sense that because everyone was remote, a lot of the interns kind of built a lot of communities within Niantic together. And then the intern host, we did a lot of events and stuff just to make sure that people had a good time. So that's a little bit about sort of, our intern program. I would say that, probably like some other companies, we look for juniors and seniors in, either bachelor's, master's, or PhD program. That's just because of our smaller classes, but there's definitely some companies that look for folks earlier on in their schooling. I don't know if that answers your question. Anything else that you were wondering about?
No, that does.
So regarding like the internship and the whole application process, what would you say would make a person stand out in the whole process?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So as I mentioned, we get a lot of applications. At this point, what we do is we really want to ensure that there's no bias in the process. I think that a lot of times it's really hard because how are you going to get an internship if you don't have a prior internship? And so I would say that a couple things we do. Obviously, internships are important because we want to see that you have that experience. And for us, it's a little different since we're looking for people in their kind of either junior or senior years. But I would say if you have side projects, say that you're just in your first year and you don't have an intern before, think about other side projects that you can do. There's a lot of things, even, if you go on GitHub, there's a lot of projects that are open. You can look, being even in Xoogler School, right, is a great opportunity for connections. Thinking about ways that even in your university, you can help out more. There's a lot of different ways to sort of stand out besides the pure internship opportunity, but I would say that's really important to ensure that, you may, even as your first year, right, you may not get the internship that you absolutely want, but just try to do something that is different and really elevates kind of your skill set. There's other things that you can sort of do is like talk to your peers. Maybe you have peers or mentors. Really try to get a mentor who's already been through it before to see if they can help you. Maybe your professors too, or other grad students who are kind of helping out with your department. And then I love cover letters. So the thing is, recruiters don't always have time to read all your cover letters. And you don't want a cover letter that basically says like, hi, I'm Marissa. I'm, in this year of school and I'm interested in internship. Like, that's not really a lot of signal. So what I would say is like, if you have something that you're really passionate because of the company, right? Like you're like, I'm super passionate about Pokemon Go, and I've been playing since it first launched, and I would really love to. I've been working on some Unity projects, and here's a link to some of the projects that I've been doing. Like that to me, I'm like, whoa! Like I'm gonna, even if you don't have a lot of experience, I'm gonna give a second look at that resume and just kind of see if there's anything we can do. Like recruiters are very busy, but I would say that we love interns. We love new grads. We want to try and give everybody the best experience possible. But we want to also make sure that we get back to people quickly. So that's one thing. We also do automated assessments in the beginning. So that is to help with bias. A lot of times if you go to a particular school or you have a certain GPA or if you've taken certain classes, that was traditionally, when I started out my career, those are kind of the signal that we're looking for. But there's a lot of ways that you can teach yourself or get that experience that's not traditionally on a resume. And so we really like trialing out different automated assessments where you actually go through either coding or just kind of design problems on your own, and then we actually look at your resume. So it's kind of tough because you don't get that person-to-person interaction right off the bat, but it really does help. It actually makes me feel a lot better that we're actually being as objective as possible.
Thanks for the answer. It seems like an interesting process and also kind of different. How would you compare the internship that Niantic Lab offers, for example, like Google or other places you worked at?
Yeah, so this is I don't know if I can absolutely answer that well. I haven't been at Google since 2018, 2008. I apologize. It's been quite a while. So not to date myself, but I still keep in touch with folks who are interning there. So I would say that it's fairly similar in some ways in the sense that there's intern matching with mentors. You look at specific groups. The difference really to me, I would say, is like the company is much smaller. So even if you're at Google, right, you're working within a certain sub-department or department, and then you may be interact. So there's going to be nice, really great components of it in the sense that it's very structured. They've been doing this since probably the couple years after they launched, and so they have a lot of experience building out programs, building out support. They probably can help with all sorts of questions. For us, we're kind of learning on the job in that sense. Like when COVID hit, we really had to, scramble and make sure that we gave people really good experience despite all these constraints. But the other nice thing is like, it's really small at Niantic, right? Like it's 600 people, but it's also still really small compared to, it's probably almost like a sub-department within a larger company. And so you really get to know everybody in that sense. We have folks attend, when you go to an all hands at Niantic, it's very different because like things are happening very, very quickly. Things are launching. You're going to be seeing a lot of that, probably a lot of the features and the work that you're building. We actually do, and I know other companies do this, we do like intern spotlights. And so they kind of, folks who have finished, they'll present their project. I was going to show you, we have an internal doc that's like photos and stuff. So it's very organized in the sense that we kind of track all of our interns. We check in with them pretty often. The mentors feel like, very, very close to their interns. They're almost like advocates for them, especially as they go through conversion. And so it's just different, mostly not because one's better than the other. It's just the size and stage of the company. And I would really recommend like you try to do both, like almost like really go to a company that's really large and has that really good structure and process, because you're going to learn a lot. Even if you think about full-time opportunities, right? You're going to learn a lot of best practices and get access to probably the state-of-the-art tools and in terms of computing. But going to a small company really teaches you how to be kind of be able to motivate yourself to work with others really closely. You're going to get very, really build those relationships because the class is so small too that you're going to get to know everybody. And hopefully, I mean, everybody, the year before this one, all the interns would hang out all the time and they would like have lunch together, go to events together. And, obviously we hosted some, but they did a lot of things on their own, which was really cool. And this year kind of same, they're doing it mostly on Slack, but it's a different feeling for sure.
That sounds like an amazing experience. And regarding like the application process is different. So what would you say is like skills that like small companies like Niantic looks for as like compared to like Facebook or Google?
Yeah, so one thing that's different, so we have a pretty standard, I didn't answer your question on that, Lucas. We have a pretty standard application process. You submit your resume, and then, we will actually, a recruiter and the hiring manager and teams will do a pre-review, and then they will move people on into the next stage, which is an automated assessment. So you'll do kind of live coding and move through there. And then after that, you'll have a couple of different interviews with potential mentors to see if there's a match. So that's kind of our process. It's kind of similar to a lot of companies. I would say that, in terms of what we really look for, what would really help is that you sort of do, if you haven't had as extensive internship experience, that you're working on a lot of the projects on your own. And so, in school, I think, some programs, they mostly teach Java, for instance. It's, some programs don't really teach C++ is something that I found. And because we use C++ really extensively for our AR platform and the server side, it's for the server platform side, it's pretty important. And, just kind of, we do focus, somewhat because folks don't actually have as much industry experience on just the pure coding skills. It's weighted a lot more heavily than probably our industry experienced counterparts on the candidate side. So that would be one thing. But there's, especially on the game side, I would say Unity is a relatively new technology. So a lot of folks are building games on their own, and that gives you a lot of experience that probably you don't always learn at university. So I would say that at a larger company, sometimes it's mostly focused on like, do you understand like general CS concepts like data structures, algorithms, all of that coding? And if you don't know some of this stuff, it's okay. I would say generally that's the case for Niantic, but we do look for a little bit more because we really put you on projects that you're going to hopefully build a feature or be able to launch something by the time you leave. And so that's kind of the goal for us. And it's a learning thing. It's always internships, I would say for almost all companies, we are not necessarily as focused on productive work as the outcome, as much as like, we want you to be able to go and say like, hey, I learned a lot from this experience and it's going to help me with my next internship. We would love if people are like, we love Niantic so much that I want to keep coming back. But the truth is like, it's much better if you try out different opportunities and companies, because sometimes like you'll be like, oh, I really like how smaller companies do things. I like how quickly things move. And I like that I'm like very important, or I'm an important part of the decision-making process. Or you're like, I actually am someone who loves structure and I really like going to a larger company because of that. So I would actually encourage you to try as many different types of internships at different stages of companies as possible.
That's cool. So for smaller companies, it's basically important to kind of be a self-starter and just show what you can do. And regarding your experience in recruiting, how have your strategies evolved when it comes to attracting and managing candidates?
Yeah, so it's totally changed. Not to date myself, but like when I started at Google, I transitioned from a research role. And at that time, I didn't even know what recruiting was. So I actually started in sourcing, which is contacting passive candidates who aren't looking for roles. Um, and it's evolved so much over time. I think that there's a really strong emphasis on candidate experience. When I was starting, you know, I'm not to say like, oh, the internet was just new. Like obviously it's been around for a long time, but candidates weren't really sharing information with one another in the sense that they weren't sharing compensation or interview strategies, things like that. So it's I like it a lot more now, in the sense that before it was like if you wanted to work at X company, you sort of conformed to what they wanted in a sense, like you either want to take this offer or you don't. You didn't have as much negotiation ability or just even ability to share information. And it was more transactional. It's not always the case, but I would say in general. Whereas now I really feel like people understand that, hey, these are people who are going to work with us. Like they're the number one most important thing to build amazing products. And like without people, you don't have anything, right? And so I think there's been a huge shift in not only that, but what I'm seeing in talent, right? And how they think about talent overall. I really like some of the things that are happening now in the sense that we're experimenting all the time. Like I said, automated assessments. We really standardize a lot of our interviews. What that means is you're asking, the same questions to the candidates for that role. It's really an emphasis on, kind of ensuring there isn't bias in the process, that we're really thinking about diversity and inclusion. Like, hey, like for us, we're building games literally for everyone, all age groups, people all around the world. And so if you have a very narrow focus of like, oh, this is the profile that we want and that's it, you're not going to be able to build a great company or great products. So that's been a huge shift as well. But I think like overall, I feel like it's become a lot more candidate friendly and focused and employee focused. And so you all are kind of entering the workforce at a really great time. I think it is tough right now with COVID and everything. So I feel bad for all of you, but I'm sure like this is something that too will pass. And as technology just becomes, just evolves even more, it's really cool to see, like even in the AR space or the game space or any other space that you're interested in, that like people are starting to almost collaborate a lot more and a lot more quickly in terms of getting information.
Gamer earphones.
Hi, Marissa. Thank you so much for answering those initial set of questions. I want to go a bit deeper in terms of what you shared regarding your experience as an analyst. So when you first graduated from UCLA, it looks like you studied economics and psychology. How did you decide to go down the research analyst path? And then I think some questions after that would be really understand what a talent sourcer is, because I think as a lot of our students are early in their careers, that's a great way to start in the industry, right? In terms of if you're a non-technical background, so.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll try to keep this brief, and this kind of goes around sort of how I view work even. So going even back even further, like I actually immigrated to the States when I was 7. My family's Taiwanese, and we didn't have a plan moving to Texas. So I grew up in a really poor neighborhood that was mostly a Black and brown community. I was kind of thought of as a minority in that community. And so access was very, very different. So a lot of things happened. I ended up moving to California kind of middle of my high school year, and started, it was perfect timing because I hadn't actually planned on attending college or any of that. I wasn't against it, just didn't have the opportunities. So growing up kind of the rest of my life in Palo Alto, I ended up going to UCLA. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I just thought, oh, I've always been interested in economics in the sense that I've read some books on it. I was actually going to go into a PhD program to work on clinical psychology and work with families. So I started at SRI, which used to be part of Stanford. It's not anymore, because I wanted to get more neurophysiology experience before entering into a PhD program. So long story short, things never work out the way you want or you plan, I guess. And I quit that job. That was the first time I quit my job. SRI, the research labs, yes, SRI International. So I quit that job for the first time. I'd been working pretty much, my family had a restaurant. So I started working when I was 7 every single day after school, and worked a number of jobs before I actually entered university. And after I quit that job, I didn't have anything lined up. I found out about Google just because a few of my friends worked there as engineers. And I was the same thing. I was like, I study econ and psychology, East Asian studies. Like, what can I actually do at Google? Because I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a scientist. And they're like, hey, you've done a lot of research work. Like, maybe you want to be a sourcer. And sourcers typically, they look online for folks who might be a match for certain roles. And you do a lot of, like, before it was a lot of Boolean strings. So you do a lot of Boolean operators into your search engine. Now there's tons of tools out there. A lot of people are on LinkedIn. One thing is, please go on LinkedIn. I'm sure Chris and James and other folks have already told you, but really, like, you almost don't need a resume probably once you start working. Most people will take your LinkedIn profile. So you don't have to write a ton, but make sure you have that updated, because that's really important. So side tangent on that. We didn't have any of that when I started, but that's kind of how I transitioned over to recruiting. Sourcing is just super fun for me. I love connecting with candidates. Sourcers typically take folks all the way through their on-sites, and then they will pass it off to a recruiter to extend the offer. And so there's really so many different areas. If you like kind of doing research online and looking for folks and connecting for folks, it's super fun. Like, I would say, like, if I weren't doing recruiting management, I would probably pick sourcing. And a lot of sourcers can source from anywhere. Like, you can source from anywhere. It's less kind of, I think when I had first started, they had to teach us like cold calling, and I hated that part. I was super shy, I still am, and I hate talking on the phone. And now it's mostly, reaching out via email and LinkedIn. So it's really, really great. And kind of I was sort of telling you sort of about my path, because, like, I think you never know what will happen to you in your career, right? Like, I thought I was going to go and be a clinical psychologist, and that changed. And now I'm kind of leading a talent team at Niantic. But I would say, like, every single company I've chosen, every single opportunity was sort of based on, like, oh, can I learn something new? Right. So Niantic, I actually never played Pokemon Go before I started. I was like super interested in the AR platform. I was like, I don't know anything about AR. Like, I'd like to learn about it. And, a lot of people will say, like, here's your career path. Like, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And then that's how you get whatever role that you want. And I would say that, definitely if that's your path, that's great. But really consider, like, who are the people that you get to work with? Can you learn a lot from them? What is this opportunity going to provide you that you didn't have before? So that's kind of why I was like saying, oh, you should try different internships at different types of companies. Because the more experience you have, like, I would say that I don't regret any choice I ever made, even if it was a hard choice in the sense that, it didn't work out exactly as I wanted. I learned something from it. And if you can take that and you are motivated, like, that's going to set you apart. And if you, especially like asking questions, like, don't just ask questions to ask questions, but really, if you can ask questions because you want to learn something, people will see that and they really will want to help you. Sorry, long-winded answer, but I wanted to make sure folks knew.
Marissa, that was a great way to really explain your background, but also going into how to really assess jobs. And I think I want to dig a bit deeper into that. A lot of our students are going in for perhaps their first set of interviews. And as you can imagine, how students get assessed or candidates get assessed is the types of questions they ask. Could you share the insights you've gained over the past, I guess, decade plus? What are these most effective questions that someone should be asking to really, one, understand about the company, but two, really for them to think about whether this company's values or how they do business or set themselves up sort of aligns with themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me think about that a little bit, because I'll just kind of talk through general themes that I look for. So I really look for folks with a growth mindset. So that's like one theme that I would say, like, it doesn't matter if you're at a large company or a small company, like, do you want to learn and grow? And so any question kind of around that that's genuine, that you're like, hey, how can someone like me in my position, like, what are some paths that you've seen from other people who've gone through either the intern program or other places, or even around like, how do you believe I can contribute or improve? So obviously these should be more specific, but I always like to hear that because it kind of shows that there's a less emphasis on self, and it really shows like more awareness of others, right? Like, how can I help the company and the people around me, even though you also want to grow, but like, how can you balance that? And then also a lot of times I'm surprised. Sometimes people will blanket apply to companies, which I totally understand. I think it's a waste of time, honestly. Like, you never know because you can find different companies that were cool that you didn't think of. But once you get to the interview stage, like, you absolutely should like have a very clear understanding of like why you would be interested in working at this company. If there are any concerns, bring them up during this time. Do it respectfully. So like, say, just as a funny example, maybe someone has like really bad Glassdoor reviews or something. Like, I wouldn't say like, oh, I saw this terrible Glassdoor review, but just say, hey, I saw this mentioned in terms of collaboration or communication. This is really important to me. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Or like, are there any ways that, you've been thinking about this challenge or something, just so that you can really, because the thing is like, the company is interviewing you, but you're also interviewing the company. So you have to really make sure you don't have to make sure absolutely you want to work there from the first interview, but you want to make sure that they understand you're serious about the company, you've done your research, and you really want to be a part of it if it makes sense.
Great. And following up from that, are there bad questions to ask, terrible sort of faux pas that you've seen across the years that you can share to our students that they should never do?
Yeah, so there are some. I would say, it depends. Like, some companies, they do like to bring up compensation right away. And you can always, so I think in certain states, I believe in New York and California, like, we actually offer candidates benchmarks. So we'll say your offer will likely be around this or this, based on your level. But some people are always like, which does not work well, is like, how much does this pay? And kind of just like diving right into compensation without any assessment, right? Because it sort of shows like sort of lack of self-awareness. Like, we have not even assessed you. We don't know like where you fall, and you're sort of already in sort of the later negotiation stages, or sort of asking for things around that. It's not the comp. It's just like, a lot of times you can ask anything, honestly. It's just how you ask it, right? I think that, some people sometimes think, and I know all of you are wonderful, so none of you would do this. But a lot of times I'll notice like, we have coordinators on our team who are wonderful, and they're like helping schedule your interviews. And I'll notice like a disparity, like someone's super nice to the recruiter or me or the hiring manager, and they're sort of rude to our recruiting coordinator. And that for me is a huge red flag. So, you want to be consistent in your behavior. I'm trying to think of other questions. I don't really like, I'm pretty direct. I'm a pretty direct person. Even if you ask for a comp up front, I wouldn't be that concerned. But probably for like a new grad position or internship position, that's going to come. They're going to tell you it's already stated. So kind of that, I wouldn't worry too much. There's not really any. Trying to think if there's any other questions that are off limits. I think a lot of people sometimes will be like, how many vacation days are, so it's around that theme, like really focusing a lot on like the perks, the benefits, without asking any other questions about the company is always a red flag to me. So it doesn't happen very often, but it happens often enough that I definitely make a note of it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start going to the Dory questions. So if you're joining us live, please start going to the Dory. We've got some submitted already. I'll turn it over to you, Lucas.
Yeah, we have a great question coming from Alina, and she's asking, if I'm interested in AR/VR for industries other than gaming, edtech, for example, how can I explore this field further? Does Niantic have any non-gaming related projects?
Yeah, so we do. So gaming is actually just our initial focus, just because, I feel like we have a lot of players, we have a lot of data that's collected. I would say that really look through, I bet the Xoogler network will have a lot of folks actually with startups that have AR and VR companies within that that are really, really relevant. I would also look through, and what I did just actually really quickly before is just like look at other companies within the AR space. So that's another thing. Like if you just look up AR companies, you look at one company, this is actually very similar to sourcing. You look at one company, you start researching that company, it'll actually refer to other companies, and then you can kind of see where you can expand your interest. And then we do have internships specifically within the AR platform that is not games based at all. So those applications actually are quite wide, and you can think about it because we have like research scientists doing computer vision work, right? Or there's a lot of stuff within AR that is not just focused on the game, because it's almost like for Niantic, we have kind of a traditional tech startup group, and then we also have the game studio group. So it's a little different than many companies and even many game studios. So you would just kind of align a little bit more with the AR platform side.
And another anonymous question, and regarding AR, how would you see the future of AR being, and what does Niantic's role in that?
Oh my goodness, that is a really good question. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that, but I'll kind of just tell you from my perspective. The AR games were never meant to be sort of the end all be all. There's so many applications, right? So education, what is a great application of AR, like how can you, especially as the world becomes more open to remote and distributed work and the way of interacting, what are things that you could teach people that you could use AR for, right? So like for instance, I'm in an emergency response group for San Francisco. I can see like there could be so many trainings, based that are AR based, or even if VR based. VR is kind of tough right now because there are a lot of constraints, right? If you don't have specific equipment or whatnot, but like there's a lot of things around that you could do. I feel like even in terms of entertainment, you're starting to see it in retail. So pretty much like every experience that you could imagine that you interact, you could have an AR component to that. So I think it's going to be super interesting. This is just the beginning, and it's kind of cool because like there are a lot of competitors in the space, which is scary, but it also means like there's clearly like an interest in it. And that's kind of how innovation happens, is like we want people competing with Niantic in that way, right? Because then we're going to build like the best platform and the best applications to AR.
Thanks, Marissa. Let's talk about Niantic, since you just mentioned that. And you work for a really inspirational leader, but also someone who's a game changer in terms of not only entrepreneurship, but clearly this new platform. Can you talk a bit about your own choice of how you decided to go work for John Hanke? So for those who don't know, John Hanke is the CEO and founder of Niantic, and he actually sold what became Google Earth to Google, and some of his technologies also became part of Google Maps. And it's so hard to, one, do that. And two, within Google, it's so hard to set up a separate autonomous unit, which John did. And on top of that, it's extremely hard to spin that out, which is what John did. So Marissa, can you talk a bit about John and one, perhaps what you've noticed from your perspective of him as a leader and how he's led the team, but also how he's led the company?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So this is kind of what I mean when I was saying like, hey, you should look for companies with folks that you really inspire you or can teach you something different. John is an amazing leader. I've worked with a lot of amazing leaders, and his product sense is super strong in the sense that I read a lot of science fiction, but it's funny because I feel like being able to combine a lot of current sort of applications into what Niantic is, right? So one thing that Chris had mentioned, I hadn't mentioned either, is that John actually launched a massively multiplayer online game prior, I think around when he was in business school. So he sort of combined the idea of like Google Maps and Earth with games and launched Niantic. He's someone who is really open. He listens to, his employees. He's really kind of hands-on leader, I would say. And I think that combination really helps Niantic be what it's today. So it's clearly the vision, right? Like very few people have that vision, but the ability to execute on that vision is really huge. Because if you look at different startups, like I've been fortunate, most of my startups that I've worked at are doing really, really well, but it's really hard to get funding and to sell, just because you believe in a vision, if you can't articulate to other people, it's really hard to get funding or get different resourcing. So it's a huge testament to who John is and kind of his leadership. I'm trying to think what else. I think that he really, like, we all kind of stand behind this mission of getting people outside together, right? And right now it's a different time and we've adapted our game to do that. But like I said, like when I joined, I didn't really even know what Pokemon Go was. Like I read a lot about it. And of course I played it once I interviewed, but I was just like, oh, it's interesting. There could be a lot of applications. What I didn't realize is like we help so many people, like in the same sense of like how talent has changed, the way we interact has changed. So even social media, how prevalent it is. It's wonderful, you can connect, but it's also kind of lonely sometimes. It's not the same. I used to just walk up to someone or call them on the phone, and it's not the same now. And the sense that Niantic like brings people together while they're playing games. People send us letters from all over the world saying like, you helped me lose weight, you helped me out of my depression, I met my partner through your game. So many things. And our social impact manager and I actually created a book for our employees internally, just from all these letters. So I think it's like he really believes in what he's building, and he's able to kind of show us like what our mission is, and we all kind of believe in it. Because I think that's really necessary as you go through, ups and downs with building a company.
And given your role being head of talent, can those things be learned as a leader? And how do people develop themselves to become someone like John in the future?
So I would say some of it is obviously, intrinsic in that sense, like, you have that talent. But I actually am someone who definitely doesn't believe talent is purely innate, right? Like you can continue to grow and learn. Doesn't matter if you're, your age now or you're 90 years old. Like if you have this interest in being better. I actually do executive coaching as well. So I coach a lot of founders and through different, stages of their companies. And I get coaching myself because I think it's important. Like John has actually evolved quite a lot, even as I've been working there at Niantic in a really positive way, right? Because every stage is different in the sense when you're just, 20 people, the way you communicate is not the way you communicate with 600 people and how you get that information out. So that's just like one very basic example. But I think like that's the thing is like there's different things that you can learn, but the ability to be open to learning is something that, hopefully you have that intrinsic ability and want, and that really helps. So even, making sure you ask questions, finding a mentor who will really help you, learning things like, even if it's hard, right? There's probably areas that you don't enjoy learning, or maybe there's like low interest, but you think it's going to be really helpful. Like try to learn. Like a lot of times I push people, like you should really learn more around statistical analysis. Like a lot of talent leaders in my field, they don't really focus on that, for instance. And I actually think it's really important. Or I'm really shy. So like I actually, do a lot of exercises and work with other people just so that I feel more comfortable speaking in front of people like all of you. So there's always, it's a combination of the two, but I would say a lot of it you can learn.
You wouldn't know you're so shy, Marissa. Less interactions, but also how you're talking to us. So thank you. So Jennifer's asking about the books and podcasts you would recommend. You mentioned about learning and other things. Could you recommend any specific books, podcasts, maybe websites or blogs people should follow or read to really help with their own learning experiences?
That's a really good question. So I mostly focus kind of on talent and self-development. One book I recently read that's kind of around that, because I don't have a lot of technical recommendations, right? Like I actually read a lot of articles on AR. Obviously, most of you have probably followed TechCrunch. They still have like really good articles. The A16Z blog, so the Andreessen Horowitz blog, actually has a lot of great articles on technology overall. I actually really like The Hustle. I don't know if you've read that. That is very random and odd, but they also cover really interesting, just general business and technology topics. I listen to the Economist podcast whenever I'm taking my dog for a walk. That's really helpful. Reboot is a really good sort of self-exploration podcast. It's by someone who was actually an investor and also now does coaching. So I actually sent this over to someone as like how to manage your board. So if you ever think about starting your own company, Jerry Colonna actually interviews a lot of CEOs and kind of talks through their past. So that's really fun. I'm trying to think what else. I consume a lot of, I'm always reading and listening. And I don't know if Chris has ever seen, like, people are always like, whoa, I have like probably, I think it's 15 feet or 20 feet long and like 9 feet high of bookshelves with just books. And it's not always books of facts, it could be fun stuff. I love science fiction. I read a ton of science fiction. I read a lot of just silly stuff for fun. I think that, I don't know, I could go on and on, but those are the ones that kind of are top of mind for me right now.
No, those are great tips. I think we've got more student submissions for questions. So Lucas, you want to ask the next one, please?
Yeah, so another great question from Alina is, how does Niantic take care of its users in terms of balancing the virtual and the real world? Like, how does it make sure that the tech creates a humane and ethical product?
That's a really great question. So we do a couple of things. Like one, we work really closely with our social impact manager. So even going back to that, and we think about just a lot of games, right? There's a lot of like free to play games, and I wouldn't say like some of them could feel a little bit predatory in the sense that they really want to exact a certain amount of, they want to monetize at a certain level just because like that's what they need to hit their metric. And so we do not have that in the sense that our games are doing really, really well, but we really do focus on the user. So we do a lot of, if you notice, like most of, probably all our games are very friendly and family friendly. We are not working on IPs that probably could make us a lot more revenue that may not kind of have those values in mind. We also kind of do a lot of, because there is that outdoor component, that kind of helps out a lot as well. So you're not just at home kind of playing I know some of these games are really fun and they're super addictive, but like our goal is not for you to increase your usage so much that like just so that we can get more revenue, right? Like we want you to be able to go outside, interact with other people. That's kind of our main goal. So just the way that the games are built themselves, that's a huge part of it. There's also things that we think about in terms of partnerships, right? People will reach out to us for partnerships that maybe their values may not align exactly with kind of what our hope is. So we will turn down those partnerships, right? Because our goal is really like, we want to give you a positive experience, and hopefully you're also going to get either positive physical or mental health benefits from it versus just being sucked in to the game. And that's kind of the cool thing about AR, right? Because you still are like you're looking on a screen, but you can kind of, unless you turn it to a different mode, like it's an overlay of your current reality. And so that kind of, I think, changes in terms of how your brain processes things. I don't know for sure, but that's what I would guess, versus being fully immersed in something where you don't really need to like look up or check on things. So that's another aspect of it. And then we also work very closely with our social impact manager. We do a lot around kind of community projects. We also, work with our National Parks Service system to help, folks to kind of introduce them to other places outdoors. So we do a lot of things like that. We also recently donated like a portion of our proceeds. I think we ended up getting about $10 million for Black creators. So, during the Black Lives Matter movement, we really wanted to help and kind of figure out ways that we could kind of be a more positive force. So we're helping and working with Black creators to be able to make games that, everybody can identify with too. So that's like a huge component for us. So those are just some things. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think it does. From what we know about Lena, she and another student, Rosie, have really been focused on humane tech. And as you can imagine, the social dilemma and all the questions that come with that. So that does help, Marissa. I want to actually go back into, as we're running out of time soon, about your own career choices for us to share more about how you decided to, or even how you found these opportunities, whether it's Figma, Thumbtack, Asana. These are all amazing tech companies, right? Were there opportunities that you went after? Was it people you used to work with? Could you share more about how someone could set up their career for such amazing success, Marissa, and explain a bit more?
Yeah, of course. And that's so nice of you. I think I got very lucky. And that's the thing. A lot of people will ask me, like sometimes colleagues or candidates will be like, did you pick these companies because you thought they would have the best outcome? And I would say, absolutely not. I got super lucky. Every single opportunity, I am lucky in the sense I think a lot about access. Like, one opportunity, especially like, Google probably opened doors for me for other companies. And so I would encourage you, if you ever are in a place that you can help other people have more access, like please consider that. But I would say that like Google to IMO, which actually is probably one of my favorite companies, that they did get acquired. People probably don't hear as much about them. They were an instant messaging aggregation system. I love that opportunity. I chose it. I actually met them through, one of the founders is one of the first 10 Google engineers. And so, and then my next opportunity at Facebook, I had never done executive search before. I'm not a big Facebook user, and I wasn't before. So they had been talking to me for a while, and I was like, I'm really happy at IMO. But when the executive search opportunity came up, I was like, I've never done that. I think it's time to make a change. I would say the same thing, Figma. I didn't know about design tools. I was like, I'm going to learn about vector design before I speak to these folks. Asana, like, I would say most of these opportunities were introduced to me either by other VCs or colleagues of folks that I had worked for before. And it's really interesting because many of these opportunities, they were not people in my field, right? They weren't other recruiters who were really pushing for me to go there. They were either founders folks who became founders at these companies or engineers that I had worked with. And so the theme of that is like, even though I'm a very shy person, I think that, when I have something to say, I'm definitely going to say it and ask questions. And I really do, like, I have this, and I tell my team this all the time. It's like, you have to be present and like, engaged. Like, even if I'm doing a task that I don't really want to do, I think about what the general like goal is, right? What is the mission of the company? What is the goal of me doing this? If it doesn't make sense, like, let's modify that. But most of the time, like, I really try to do the best job that I can do, even if it's hard. And that is the one thing that I feel like will stand out is like, I'm not smarter or like more capable than any of my colleagues. I've now like feel super lucky to have access and opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had before. And I do not take that for granted. I still work my butt off every single day. And that is like, people actually do see that. And I don't want you to overwork yourselves, but like, if you feel like something's important, like, please, like, if you just do a really good job, people will see that and they will notice, and they will, next time they have a new opportunity or they have an opening, they're probably going to think of you and really engage you.
No, that's such a great point in terms of however small the task is. You never know who's looking, whether it's your teaching assistant, if you're still in school, whether it's a small internship or volunteer opportunity, you never know where they could lead, right, Marissa? And
That's very true. And then one thing, Chris, I totally along that note is like really try to help people when you can. Like be a really good mentor. If you end up being a manager, really go out of your way because like one, you're helping someone else. And then also I've actually had a lot of recommendations for jobs from previous reports. Like they're like, I really enjoyed working with you. I think you'd be a great manager because you were before. Like I really want to work with you again. And so think about every opportunity, like don't waste your time, right? Like if you can interact with someone, that's probably going to be a really positive interaction and you have control of that too. So sorry to cut you off, Chris, but that's one thing that what you said really brought up.
No worries. And that's something you mentioned about VC. So we've been emphasizing to the students how important venture capital is, not necessarily because we want everyone just go to venture capital, but frankly, they are the nodes. They open up opportunities and they know a lot of different things. And if you know, one, how venture capital work, perhaps explore that field. Three, perhaps start getting to know folks who have that kind of access. As you mentioned, access is so important. You will know opportunities, even if you're not interested in venture capital itself. So thank you for mentioning the venture capital industry. We're about running out of time, but we do want to go back to the jobs available back at Niantic as we're about to finish up. We have some students based in Europe and Asia. Can you talk about the opportunities in your different offices? Do they cover different things, whether it's in Tokyo, Hong Kong, London, or do they essentially work with your team in Seattle and LA and San Francisco?
Yeah, so we have offices all over, as Chris mentioned. Some of them do focus on specific things. For instance, like London and Sunnyvale are kind of our AR engineering research arm. Tokyo, we have an amazing game studio. We also have a lot of folks within business development there as well, and they're wonderful. I would say engineering is pretty much distributed everywhere. So that's one area. In EMEA, I would say Hamburg, we have actually a really great marketing team there. So we try to cover actually kind of thinking about like, North America, APAC, EMEA. We'd like to expand into other regions as well. But right now for internship opportunities, we're still working on that, but we'll probably have openings mostly just on the engineering side right now in research in London and then across the US. We did host interns from other locations as well. So we're just kind of figuring out again if we're able to do that. Our offices will not open until probably summer of next year. So we're planning actually on sort of a remote internship opportunity for now.
Thank you, Marissa. And just confirm, most of your job openings for people younger in career are internships or people who have some experience in engineering. There's not really a new grad product position open now, is there, or will there be one?
We don't, unfortunately. We've been actually discussing this and we'd really like to do it. Probably it may not be until next year. We're actually reaching out to the product team again because they would love interns. We just mostly make sure that they have a commitment and they're able to really give our interns a really good experience. So they're trying to figure out like what could, our interns work on. And right now it's seeming like we're not sure. It's kind of 50-50 whether we're going to have it or not.
Thank you, Marissa. And a final question for today. If you were a gap year student, what would you be doing between now and let's say going back to school next August? How would you spend it? What's the best way to do it?
Oh my goodness. I would normally say travel, but do not travel right now. I actually really enjoy like Coursera or different courses. That's really fun to me. I actually am, I'm more of a, someone who learns just by reading. So like, I don't really, I would probably spend a long time just kind of going through different topics, like making a list of all the topics I want to learn about, and then kind of narrowing those down and prioritizing them. So that's something I would do. I would try to volunteer. There's a lot of actually different types of volunteer opportunities that you can do remotely. And then, whether you're an engineer or not, like there's probably different areas even as you're thinking like, hey, if I'm going to go and move into marketing, or if I'm going to move into customer operations, what are some just generally best practices that I could kind of learn and brush up on. There's always great kind of skills like communication, writing, like you're going to need that for everything. And so that's another thing that I would do. One fun thing I did was I did sort of like an improv acting / singing class, and I hate singing and I hate improv. Like that's not something for me, but I always do something that makes me slightly uncomfortable, just to see if I can get better at it.
That's
I was
incredible.
the worst one in the class for sure, but it was really fun.
That's incredible, Marissa. I think you've given a lot of students insights into not only a career going from Google or a research analyst to start with to where you are today and things they can really take away as they build on their career. So thanks you for sharing so much with us today, and we appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much, Chris. And I wanted to do a little raffle, but I know we're totally out of time. So I'll sync with you and James just to see how we can best do that, because I would love to send some of you some Niantic swag.
We love swag. Thank you so much. So for students following along on YouTube Live, this is it for today's classes and sessions. We'll come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. where we're going to have Careers in Social Policy by Angela Mather as our speaker. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, students, for joining today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.